Hello, everyone. Today we will be reviewing slash psychoanalyzing three films from the Jurassic Park franchise. We will be dissecting Jurassic Park 1993, Jurassic World 2015, and the latest installment from the beloved franchise, Jurassic World Rebirth. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Jurassic Park, it's not necessarily a horror film, but it does have a lot of horror elements to it that make it so much fun and easier to dissect and to psychoanalyze. As I grew older, I saw that all of the deaths have a lot of meaning to them, creating an analysis of the person based on gender, race, presumed sexuality, how they interact with children. There's a lot of morality and a moral lesson behind the franchise of Jurassic Park. Yes, it's about dinosaurs, but really there's a moral ground or moral story, a cautionary tale, and who should survive in case of a human extinction, who deserves to survive in case of a natural disaster. Let's start with a quote from Slavoj Žižek. Cinema doesn't give you what to desire, but it tells you how to desire. This franchise tells us how to desire in order so that we are worthy of survival. So the very first section is called Death and Who Deserves to Survive in Jurassic Park 1993 and Jurassic World 2015. The death scenes in both the original film and Jurassic World exist as markers of who society thinks should survive during a catastrophic event, whether it's an apocalypse, an environmental disaster, etc. Jurassic Park also helped shape the formula for blockbuster films, disaster films, environmental disasters or an alien invasion. It inspired so many others about human survival. The people who die and how they die often have symbolic meaning, especially when analyzed through gender, sexuality, and their overall performance in the film. Let's begin with one of the most iconic and memorable death scenes of all the franchise, which is Wayne Knight's character, Dennis Nedry. Nedry plays an important role. He is the one that betrays Dr. Hammond, played by Richard Attenborough, by stealing valuable dinosaur embryos. He's portrayed as an overweight, nerdy man, disliked by his co-workers, and he's not exactly very masculine or dominant. When Jurassic World came out 2015, it became clear to me that Fatphobia had a formulaic component of the franchise. One of the very first deaths in the 2015 film occurs when a scene where the hybrid dinosaur, the mix between T-Rex and Velociraptor created by Claire, played by Bryce Dallas Howard, this new I-Rex sets a trap for Chris Pratt. Owen and a park supervisor are inside the hybrid's enclosure, its lair, studying its claws because it had escaped. Claire realizes that the hybrid is still in the lair, and because the hybrid misses to hunt for fun, she came up with a little scheme. Chris Pratt in that very scene yells run, and he has no trouble running. He got fit for Guardians of the Galaxy, and it was a whole sensation, and not he was obviously fit for it. They decided to cast an overweight actor for the role of the supervisor that is very, very reminiscent of Dennis Nedry. So back to the original film, Nedry's death is both, graphic and sort of humiliating. After successfully locking the system, his computer, stealing the embryos, he tries to flee in his Jeep, but he gets stuck in the mud. Then he gets out of the Jeep, he pants, he's visibly out of shape, and then he encounters the Dilophosaurus, who he treats like a pet. Dilophosaurus comes out with the venom until he's met with his demise. This parallel between the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World characters is very much intentional. The 2015 tries to recreate this motif of the overweight man. Psychoanalytically, fatness in film is often symbolized as lack of control, moral failure, or excess. It's a break from the ideal body image, and it's often used as comic relief, asexuality, or monstrosity of the other to reinforce normativity. In Lacan's mirror stage and the imaginary order, the ideal I, the coherent, idolized body image, is what the subject identifies with. So fat bodies disrupt that image. They confront the viewer with the failure of bodily control, sparking anxiety or shame. And so society promotes slimness as this wholeness. Fatness then becomes something that must be expelled in a narrative for the illusion of control to be preserved. Julia Kristeva, in Powers of Horror, an essay on abjection, defines the abject as that which must be expelled in order to become clean. Bodies that exceed the norm and challenge the boundaries. In this view, fatness becomes abjection, too much, too porous, too close to the breakdown of identity. To quote Kristeva, it is thus not lack of cleanliness or health that causes abjection, but what disturbs identity, system, and order. Fatness must be purged so that lean, fit bodies, those that seen as reproductively viable, can survive and repopulate after the disaster. So the message is clear. Those who disrupt the fantasy must die. Suzanne Bardot in Unbearable Weight, Feminism and Western Culture and the Body, influenced by Foucault and psychoanalysis, writes about fatphobia. Our culture does not tolerate excess, especially bodily excess. It marks a lack of self control. The cautionary tale within these two deaths is fatphobia functions as a moral judgment and a warning to people. So the second section is called Castration, Feces, and the Lawyer in the Toilet. Another elaborate and very symbolically loaded death in Jurassic Park is that of Donald Genaro, played by Martin Ferrero. His portrayal, relationship to the other characters, and his ultimate death all reflect a deeper meaning about emasculation, castration anxiety, and presumed homosexuality. From the moment he appears on screen, Genaro's masculinity is being questioned. He plays Hammond's lawyer, and the first time he appears is in that scene when he's being pulled from this floating wooden thing and he's arriving to the Dominican Republic in the Mano de Dios amber mine and he's wobbling. He's uncomfortable. One of the miners says very jokingly, bet you 1,000 pesos he falls. He doesn't fall in the water. He gets there safely on land, but he slips as soon as he's on the ground. That very first scene marks a lack of physical competence and signals a demeanor of out of place, unfit, perhaps queer coded, and very effeminate. In contrast to other characters that are hypermasculine, Sam Neill and even Jeff Goldblum, they display this dominant masculinity. This character's death, Genaro's death, is iconic. He dies in the toilet. I thought, there's no reason behind it if we psychoanalyze it and use film theory and this kind of what can we get from that? In the scene when the T-Rex comes, Dr. Grant and Jeff Goldblum are in one car. It's the children are in another car with the lawyer, and the T-Rex comes out. And the first thing the lawyer does is abandon the children. He leaves the children in the car. So he chooses self-preservation over the protection of two terrified children. Sam Neill and Jeff Goldblum, they save the children. This is where Freud's theory of anal eroticism becomes relevant. In Character and Anal Eroticism, 1908, Freud writes that during the anal stage, the child learns to associate control over feces with power, value, and morality. Feces becomes the first gift the baby gives to the parents. The child's interest in its feces is originally narcissistic. The feces are part of its own body. They are its first creation. Later, in connection with toilet training, the child learns that giving up this part of its body pleases the parents. What's fascinating is that Genaro's death is literally on the toilet, the very source of control, shame, and symbolic loss. He dies as a man who refused responsibility, abandoning the children, showed no courage, and was perceived as not masculine enough to survive the moral tale of Jurassic Park. The dissolution of the Oedipus complex, Freud explains how the castration threat ends the Oedipus complex in boys, situating the fear of bodily loss at the center of masculine development. In Genaro's case, his failure to protect the children violates the unwritten moral order of survival. His cowardice and implied emasculation render him as symbolically castrated. He dies at a place associated with loss, shame, and the anal stage, as if the film suggests something went wrong during his early psychosexual development. His death is not just physical, it's symbolic castration in the Freudian sense. Children then are not incidental in Jurassic Park films. They serve as moral compass, symbols of reproduction and continuity of the human race, and anchors of ethical behavior. If a character threatens them, abandons them, or simply fails to desire their protection, that character is dead, honey. Our next section is Taming the Working Independent Childless Woman and the Rise of the Final Family. So we get introduced to Bryce Dallas Howard's character Claire in Jurassic World. She's a workaholic. She is not married. She doesn't have children. She's career obsessed. When her two nephews want to go visit her in the Jurassic Park, she leaves them with a nanny. She is creating the Indominus Rex, this hybrid between Velociraptor and T Rex. The name itself is loaded. Indominus from Latin translates to untamable or fierce, a metaphor not just for the dinosaur, but for Claire herself, a powerful, childless woman who refuses traditional domestic roles. Indominus Rex is calculated, and she's the monstrous creation of Claire's ambition. That is what the Indominus Rex represents. The shift happens. Claire abandons the children in the film and leaves them with a nanny who also the nanny isn't like taking care of them. She's in her phone and like, yeah, whatever. That's one of the reasons that she dies. She's not really clearly fully present for the children. That serves also as a moral compass story. So the shift happens when the IREX goes out. The park fully shuts down and dinosaurs start attacking the guests of the park. So once Claire knows that she is doomed and her career is over, she shifts. Her demeanor shifts. She becomes a very protective mother. And she in the film is the one who takes care of the children. Owen, Chris Pratt, can go with the Velociraptors and save the day from the IREX. So she becomes a symbolic mother figure. Not only does she have a romance by the end of the film, she is sealed with a kiss with Chris Pratt, but she now becomes the mother. Claire has now fully conformed to the heteropatriarchal order. She's softened, romanticized, and set up for a potential partner and a future mother. This mirrors the structure of the original family in Jurassic Park. Sam Neill and Laura Dern are not presented romantically coupled, but they function as the symbolic parents, as a heterosexual cisgender mother and father protecting the two children. Together, they form what I call the final family, the model of reproduction, order, and survival. Just as a horror has the final girl, whom Carol J. Clover famously described as a boy who must undergo symbolic castration to become a man and survive, in Jurassic Park, we have what we call the final family. And this final family survives because it represents the symbolic family conservative unit: mother, father, daughter, son. Case of Jurassic World, mother, father, and two sons. So the original Jurassic Park becomes a blueprint for countless disaster films that follow, eliminating those other so they preserve the family unit. These families are usually white, cisgender, heterosexual. They represent the reproductive future of humanity. So by the end of the film, the Jurassic World 2015 film, Claire has been redeemed. She has now a boyfriend, her career is over, and the monster she created is defeated. It is dead. The untamable woman has finally been tamed. So she's no longer a threat. She's now compatible with the symbolic final family. Owen and her and the kids form the family unit. Drawing from Barbara Creed's The Monstrous Feminine in 1993, we can see how this narrative plays out as a classical case of punishment and containment. Creed, building on Kristeva, Freud, Lacan, argues that horror often constructs women as monsters when they defy reproductive expectations. Women's monstrousness is tied to her reproductive function, whether she refuses it, exceeds it, or embodies it in an unnatural way. The Indominus Rex is Claire's monstrous double. She is the career unbound, uncontained, untamable, career driven woman. She has no maternal instinct. She kills for fun and she must be destroyed. Once the I-Rex dies, Claire is allowed to live, but only because she's now been redomesticated. Jurassic World, though not a horror film by genre, borrows heavily from horror logic, female ambition, is punished. As Tanya Modleski wrote in Loving with a Vengeance, 1982, career women in pop culture are often portrayed as secretly unfulfilled until they are saved through romance or submission. The career woman is either punished for her ambition or saved through romantic domestic submission. We finally move to the chapter of Jurassic World Rebirth, a not really woke rebirth of the franchise. Jurassic World Rebirth attempts to deviate from the original film of Jurassic Park. Jurassic World Rebirth is the first in its franchise to have a female in the very lead, following Sam Neill's and Chris Pratt's steps. Scarlett Johansson is the main lead. She plays Zora Bennett, who is a mercenary with a military background. The film, we see that she is not really with a husband. She doesn't have children. She does talk about her military partner that died in a mission, but it is unclear if they had a romantic relationship. I think they did, and the partner died. So no boyfriend, no husband, no children. But the potential of a romantic relationship is always there in Jurassic Park. Played by Jonathan Bailey, Dr. Henry Loomis is sort of like the romantic partner of Scarlett Johansson. They don't seal it with a kiss. They don't have this very flirtatious scenes. They do flirt at one point. Zora Bennett, Scarlett Johansson says, "Nice rocket," to Jonathan Bailey. This leaves potential space for her to be the symbolic mother. In the first minutes of the film, we get introduced to a crew for a high risk mission. This pharmaceutical company wants to extract DNA blood from three dinosaurs so they can make potent medicine that could cure cancer. This representative, Martin Krebs, played by Rupert Friend, he's in a suit, and this is very much the motif of the emasculated lawyer Genaro in the original film. But in this film, Rupert Friend is very masculine. And even though he is masculine looking, very dominant, how he relates to the children marks his fate, right? So there are a lot of masculine characters across all the films from the franchise. You can pass the test of masculinity, productively viable, suited to become the father figure, but are you going to treat the children well? And are you going to fulfill the expectations of the father? That is what determines if they live or die in the moral lessons of Jurassic Park. So as always, you can tell who's going to die the moment they show up on your screens. One of the very first victims is a crew member who gives off major lesbian from Bushwick vibes. She had tattoos. She had sort of like a punk rock haircut. She was in full tomboy, very much queer-coded character. So very queer character. They killed her off. Another crew member who was like a third, not even a secondary character, but third character, a black man who was fit. He died on a mission and he could have escaped easily. But these two people were from a French colony. They are not American. So, from that moment, Western anxieties of the other, and so chop the Western anxieties about the other and how that needs to be expelled. Going back to the children, this is the first time in the franchise that Jurassic Park has non-white children. They are on a boat ride in open sea. It's the last day of summer before they go to classes. It's a teenage girl and a little girl, and the teenage girl brought her boyfriend and the father is most likely divorced. Sea monsters tilt the boat and they want to eat them, of course. And the crew mission that I'm talking about with all of these characters is going on boat as well, close to the island where the dinosaurs are, and they have to rescue them because they were like, Mayday, Mayday, please. And so that's how children get introduced now to the story. So now the children become the moral compass of the film. Like Kenado, Krebs, a Rupert friend, the two suits, seal their fate when they fail to help. So in the boat, when they're rescued and the Latino children are there, in one of the scenes, Martin Krebs, the pharmaceutical, very masculine guy, sees the teenage girl slip and he does nothing. She does fall in the water because Martin Krebs is like looking. So from that moment on, yes, you're masculine. Yes, you could fit the father, but that's not what a father would do. So children are not just characters, they are tests. If a character doesn't care about them, they're coded as morally unworthy of survival. But the symbolic family unit in the end is different. Sora and Henry, Scarlett Johansson and Jonathan Bailey are obviously the surrogate parents, but it's a little different. Marsha Ali is also there, sort of like the uncle who Marshall Ali is very masculine man, very, very masculine, and he does protect the children. In one of the final scenes of the movie, he sacrifices himself so the little girl can go and he distracts the monster. But he lives. That's why he lives, because he protects the children. Continuity is still on. There is not a sealed kiss between Johansson and Bailey, but a presumed romance for the next film is obviously there. We have a continuity and reproduction values from, the teenage girl and his boyfriends. It is family centered, but racially diverse. However, there's now queer sexuality in the family. So to conclude this psychoanalysis of Jurassic Park, Jurassic Park World, and Rebirth, they function as a cautionary tale about who deserves to survive based on rules of gender, race, sexuality. If you have an American citizenship, if you don't speak English, if you are an other or anything, and you're reproductive, valuable, and if you're able to fit the mold of what it should be, and if you're able to fit mother, father, traditional roles in how you relate to children. So the symbolic family unit in the original and Jurassic World, it's white, cisgender, straight. Nowadays, we do get the diversity. People who die in the films, overweight people, queer coded people, childless people, non Western people, they are expelled from the fantasy of the final family. So, going back to the quote from Žižek, cinema doesn't give you what to desire, but it tells you how to desire. It tells you to desire to be a protector, to desire to be a surrogate father or mother, and to prove your worth through reproductive morality. Survival isn't exactly about outrunning a velociraptor or a T-Rex. It's about embracing your position and your role in the final family. So yes, Jurassic Park is about dinosaurs, but beneath the spectacle, it's about the survival fantasy built around the ideal human, and a fantasy that tells us how to desire, how to behave, and who gets to live or die in the franchise of Jurassic Park. So if you like this analysis of the Jurassic Park franchise, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.